Okay.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for another episode of Sober in Seattle. My name's Lara, and we are streaming in from Seattle Intergroup down here in the lovely Georgetown neighborhood of Seattle. You should come down and visit us at 5507 6th Avenue South. And today I have a friend that I've known for, a long time, at least 3 decades. And I love it because uh, Jim D is here with us today, and so Jim and I got sober 1 year apart in August. So every year I send him my AA coin, which is really great. And we used to work together at a local adolescent treatment center, and so Jim will talk a little bit about that. But welcome, Jim. Thanks for coming down.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. And we had to postpone a couple times, so you were flexible, and that's awesome. So I was talking to you a little bit before the podcast. I know we've known each other a long time, but I don't know some of the details of especially your early sobriety. So I was asking you got sober in Seattle.
Right.
And that was how long ago?
35 years.
35 years. Wow. Okay. And you're saying that the home group that you used to have isn't there anymore, but it was somewhere in the North Seattle area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and so did you play a pretty active role in Alcoholics Anonymous in your early sobriety?
In the beginning, that's what I did mostly. That original home group was quite large and divided after the meeting was open, divided into about 5 smaller groups. There was a big book study, there was a journaling group, and there was also a spiritual group. And I said, well, I probably need to go there. So that's where I went. And it's funny how a few years ago, the house across the street from me came up for sale, and a woman bought it. And I saw her out in the driveway, and I said, well, okay, I'm going to go and introduce myself and welcome to the neighborhood. And she was from that group, the original group. It's a small world here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she's still very active in AA and does sponsees and all that. She's very, very active in it. Yeah. So, so that group is where I got started, and the spiritual group was, I don't know how it got named that, but it was, people were really talking very openly about difficult problems in their life. And at that time, I had a list of difficult problems about a mile long. And I said, oh, this is good. I don't feel alone and everything. So that's where I got started. And I went every Monday night religiously to that group. And then I started exploring other AA groups, but always kind of went back there. And I think sometimes I went back to the first AA meeting I ever went to. That was over in Bellevue. I can't remember the name of the street, but it's on the top. Maybe it's called a hilltop meeting, or so. It's on the top of a hill over there. And the way that I got there, before I started to go to AA and do any recovery work, a friend of mine said, hey, there's this guy that's doing these workshops about personal growth and family stuff, and he does guided meditations. He does all kind of new agey stuff, And I used to affectionately refer to the place as woo-woo school. But there was a woman there who uh, was a cocaine addict, and she was very open about it. And she said that it was difficult for her to stop, but she was in 12-step groups and was now struggling with smoking, stopping smoking. She said, "This is nuts." She said, "I didn't think I could ever get off cocaine, but smoking is really difficult." So anyway, in the course of this organization that I went to, um, I chatted with her about addiction a little bit, and one day she just said to me, "What are you going to do about it?" And I was taken aback by that and didn't like to be questioned like that, and I just pushed back at it and I said, "What do you have to offer?" My smart ass, right?
Mm.
And she said, "Here's my phone number. Call me sometime." So a couple days later, at the time I was living alone, I was sitting in my living room drinking and just felt like crap. That was kind of my life. I was alone and drank every day, a lot of beer, 1 to 2 6 packs a night, every day. And so I sat there and I said, "Well, now what do I do with her phone number?" So I called her and she goes, "Okay." She said, "Okay, meet me at this meeting, like right then." And I said, "No, I'm not driving anyplace." She said, "Okay, meet me at this." And the next night, meet me at this certain meeting. So I did. I went there and I said, "I want to be with you here." I was holding her hand because I was a little terrified about being there. And she she sat. I sat right next to her, and when the meeting opened, and the chairperson said, "Who's here for their first, second, or third meeting?" And I just sat there like, "Well, I didn't want to acknowledge it." And she poked me and made me raise my hand, and so I went like, very quickly up and down. And okay, so that meeting used to have, it was again another large meeting, and they used to have a break, halftime I call it, and people would go get coffee and go outside and smoke cigarettes and come back in. And at that halftime, she said, "I have to leave now." I said, "Oh God, don't leave me here alone." No, she said, "You're okay. You're okay." She said, "But I need to leave now." I said, and she said, "You promised me you'll stay here for the whole meeting." So I did. And I went at the end of the meeting, a person came up and wanted to be my sponsor. And I said, I'm not doing this. This is all too new for me right now. And I went out, got in my car, and she had put a big book in my car.
Mm.
And I went home that night, and normally, just when I went in the house, the first thing I did was open a beer. And I didn't. I had beer in the house. I didn't drink any of it. And I remember it being really, really hot. It was in August 27th.
Mm.
So I went down to my basement, which was very cool with like air conditioning down there, and I had a futon down there. And I took that book down there with me, and I just started reading it, and I fell asleep reading it. And that was my start. I never went back after that. That's how I got started at all
Wow.
this. So, yeah.
That's cool.
That was a start.
So then I know that you worked in treatment centers.
Mm-hmm.
I know we met working in a treatment center, but did you work at any other treatment centers, or when did you realize you wanted to become a counselor?
I didn't know that I wanted to become a counselor when I started down that road. Prior to that, I had worked in manufacturing all my life. Computers, wire and cables, underwater telephone cable. And the last job I had in that business, I hated it. And I said, "I'm not doing that anymore, and I don't know what I'm going to do." And so I looked into, well, what are the requirements to become a counselor? And said, well, you have to take certain educational things. And so I went and I took the first class.
Where did you take classes at a local?
North Seattle Community
huh?
College.
Yeah.
And I think at that time, before you could even start, you had a 2 years sober. Mm. And I wasn't quite there. And so I went up to the instructor and talked my way into the class.
Mhm.
She was very cool about it, also in recovery. And so, um, and I met 3 or 4 people from the same place you and I worked there
Mhm.
in that class.
Mhm.
And one of them said, "You should come there and talk to us because we have interns all the time and we're looking for them all the time. You would probably work out okay." Well,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I'll go there. And so I did, and I ended up working there, you know, almost 12 years.
Wow, I didn't realize you were there that long.
Yeah, yeah, and so that was an interesting experience. And I, when I got there, the person who was going to be my like lead person and sort of show me what to do there, the first thing he said is, "What do you want to do here?" Which was kind of a shock to me because usually any other job that I had, your first day there, they told you what you were going to do. Right?
Mhm.
This was like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to see if I can work with kids." Okay, and that's where it went. And so I did for almost 12 years.
Mhm.
And it was quite an experience.
Did you like that job?
I did up till the end, yes.
Yeah.
The end was not much fun.
No, but I thought you did a really. I mean, I worked with you briefly for a
Mhm.
short period of time, and just thought you had a good way with the kids. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that I thought that was great. I've talked to a few people that got sober going through that program. That program was helped a lot of people. So after where'd you go after that? After 12 years of that?
I went to an adult daytime outpatient, intensive outpatient program that was in a hospital. It was a hospital based
Oh,
hospital setting.
okay.
And that was great.
Mm-hmm.
That
And
was,
not just for alcoholics and drug addicts.
Yeah.
Only. Okay.
Yeah. We had a detox ward there. So a lot of people that were referred to my program came from there, and I worked with the person who was running that the detox admission person.
Mm-hmm.
Also worked at the same place you and I did,
Mm-hmm.
probably after your days there. But,
Yeah.
So I got to meet a lot of really interesting people, and it was quite a switch from working with adolescents and quite a switch to be in a hospital setting.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would get a lot of people referred to our program and do the assessments on them. And some of them got admitted and right out of detox, and they were just starting. Then there were other people in the program who had been in and out of recovery several times, or relapsing. And
So did you deal with people who were court ordered?
yes,
to
court
go
ordered
to the-
people
Mhm.
there, and had to do all that.
Yeah.
Report any absences, no, which I really didn't like because.
Sure.
But that's the deal. You got to
Sure.
do that. So, but I had some great experiences there with those folks. And another interesting thing that happened to me at that hospital was there was a senior citizen group of people in recovery, and we had one of the counselors and I in our group. That was his specific field, working with senior citizens.
Yeah.
And so the hospital gave those people space to use for an AA home group. And every year they would invite a couple of the counseling staff there to come and have lunch with them. And I got invited to do that, and you were expected to talk about your recovery program. Okay. So I got invited, and of course I wanted to go. And I thought, what am I going to say to people who are, at that time, probably 30 years older than I was? No, 20, maybe 20 years older.
Mm-hmm.
Been around a lot longer than I have. What am I going to tell them about this? this? What, and they're all in recovery, and they come to this group with, Okay, so I went there, and the way I saw, the answer to my question was, what am I going to tell them? I didn't know where to start, so I used the alphabet as a tool, and I started with A, and I said, what did I do that fits there? Of course, AA, right? And then B was, I can't even remember what I put for B, but I did something for every letter that was directly connected to my recovery. And Z, the other end of the alphabet, was Zydeco dancing. So I was really exploring a lot of things in my recovery. And I wish I had that list. I don't have it anymore because I ended up dumping all this stuff I had from my work. And that probably went with it. But I could probably make another one now. So that was a very interesting thing. And they all said, well, can we get copies of that? That's really cool. So that was a great experience at that hospital.
How long did you work there?
Maybe a year, not very long, because they came around and closed it. They closed the only thing they kept open was the detox, and then they had a women's inpatient recovery program that met pregnant or new mothers primarily there.
Sure.
But I don't know if even that's going anymore. The hospitals are closing down.
There is a program called CUPS program for, I believe, something like that, for pregnant women. Yeah. I think it's still going at Swedish Hospital.
Okay, that was in Ballard.
Yeah.
So after that, a former coworker from the adolescent place where you and I worked was working at a hospital downtown, and I called her, and she said, yeah, we're looking for people. So I went down there and I got hired, and I worked there for probably 2 years, I would say. And then same thing, they came around, closed down all the programs. At that time, the hospital was doing some very significant operational changes. In other words, how they run this hospital. And one of them involved employees taking a week and making improvements to their workspace and their work process, the whole thing, rearranging offices. Everybody had the same stuff on their desk, almost militaristic. But all that comes from the Toyota car company. You're frowning and wondering about this, but it's a very effective. Things get very efficient. The use of time, it's so effective that you may find yourself working on one of these things, and your job ends up getting cut. So the hospital, in order to take that concern away, said, if that happens, we promise you we will give you another job someplace, which they did for a number of years. And I got one. I got one in a facility that treats people, specifically designed for people with HIV and AIDS. And that place was operated by a hospital. So there was basically like an outpatient program called Adult Day Health, and then a residential program, which was the top 2 floors of a 3-story building, which the hospital built specifically from the ground up to treat people with HIV and AIDS. So I went there and I started up not a recovery program. I didn't want to get involved in all the manuals and all that stuff. And so I basically worked with people there. Part of my day, every day, was an addiction group. Totally voluntary, no attendance records kept, none of that kind of stuff. Just come on in if you want to have a chat about it. And so some people came and went quite quickly, and other people came every single day. And a couple of people that I worked there doing that work for probably So almost 8 years, I think, and some people came every day. One guy told me, "You know more about me than anybody else in the world." I
Mm.
went, "Oh dear." So
Well, what a great was this primarily towards the end of their life, or did they have AIDS or just HIV, or how
so
did it work?
there's both.
Mm.
The outpatient adult day health program, the main goal there was medication management to keep the HIV under control,
Sure.
to avoid the conversion to full-blown AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal there was at least 95% compliance, which is lofty.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have to take medicine every day, some days you forget. Right? And we don't have AIDS, we don't have addiction, we're not using anymore, and these people are, many of them still using, have mental health issues. So the compliance at 95 is difficult, but that's the goal. And then that was on the first floor of the place. We served 2 meals a day there: hot meal breakfast and hot meal lunch. And we had places where people could go nap. We had rooms there. We had televisions. It was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. Incredible nursing staff. Just I've never seen anything like that. The top 2 floors were mostly, specifically for end of life care. And in the beginning of the AIDS crisis, people that came in there would, they might die 2 days later or quicker. That's changed.
Yeah.
People now come there. The admission criteria is, at least it wasn't when I was there, you had to be diagnosed with what you wouldn't have less than 6 months to live. And the care that was received there, people came in like that, and they lived for 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because they got meds every single day, incredible nursing care, just very. If I ever need that kind of facility, that's where I want to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful.
So before you were talking about how you feel like that's like the most important thing that you've done in your life. How did that affect you, and what makes that the most important thing you've done in your life? To work with at that.
Oh.
I'm assuming you meant to work with the HIV/AIDS
I think
patients.
as far as doing that kind of work, it was the most challenging and by far the most interesting, because there were people there with mental health issues, basically the co-occurring disorders they're referred to, and then all kinds of health problems, and that I didn't know anything about. Right, I was called a care manager there, and one of the people that I was assigned to had Huntington's disease. I didn't even know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we had never had a person there with that problem. And this person was pretty advanced along, and we made some pretty serious mistakes in the beginning. But his wife came, and she was our teacher. She was so caring about him and so patient with us, but also saw that we responded immediately to her suggestions. And she was always correct, because she'd been taking care of the guy for years, but it was now past that point. Right. So I had never worked with anyone like that. And I had some experience with people with co-occurring disorders, but not as severe as I dealt with there. So as far as, being a counselor, doing recovery programs and stuff, that was, I would say, the most diverse, because the chemical dependency was a part of it. The rest of it was basically any life problem you can think of. So
mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, maybe the most important thing that I think I've ever done in my life is stop using.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that my life now, 35 years later, is so different and so much better. And the people in my life are so much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I have people in my life now that I'm crazy about that I never would have met, because they're not in that addictive behavior scene that I was in. So
You have lifelong friends, right?
I have lifelong friends.
Right.
Yes.
You meet with a group of them every month, don't you?
Pretty close, pretty close. It used to be more than that. We used to meet every week for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a men's group.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been meeting for over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of look at each other and nobody knows how this keeps going, but it does. And it's great. It's great.
That's awesome.
It's great. It's my main support group in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have been doing it for so long. We're completely, totally open with each other about anything. And
well, they talk about in AA about how important it is, like in steps 10 and steps 10, to be accountable, right? To be accountable. And it seems like a group like that would be a place where you guys can be accountable to each other.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. The one thing I really enjoy about your story is that so you get sober in AA and you do work with adolescents and you do work with people with addictions and you run an addiction group, but your service isn't necessarily in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That you have lived a life of service since you got sober, but it's been through other avenues. And I really like that because, well, AA isn't the only place to be of service, right? But the principle of being of service to other human beings is what's important.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yes, that's a whole learned behavior for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't care much about anybody
Right.
when I was using all the time. So
Right.
it's a huge change.
Right.
And I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this, but I had to do something different. And okay, I'll go at least explore it. And that's basically how it all got going for me. To do the work in the recovery centers and treatment programs, inpatient, outpatient, hospital settings. That I have explored a lot of different things outside of AA that I explored them specifically along the path. I'm going to explore this to see if I can add it to my recovery process. And I did a lot of different things. I am very attracted to a lot of Buddhist writing that I've read and looked at, and I went to Nepal a few times. Buddhism is very active over there. It's one of Buddhism. A lot of Hindus there. There's borders with India. So anyway, what attracts me is that they think about things quite differently than we do, and I like that.
Yeah, it's refreshing. Huh?
Yeah, one of my favorite authors has it's maybe a half a page in a book about accepting our imperfections, which has been a burden for me my whole life. Because I like to have things right and I don't like to make mistakes, and I better wake up to that. And it was, and also the fact that it used the term accepting them. AA says acceptance is the answer to all our problems, right? So there's a definite connection there. So I mean, that's what the B was in the alphabet, was Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't claim to be a Buddhist. But I like a lot of what I've read, and I continue to explore that. So
well, I love that. I love that story, and I know that you could go on about things because you've lived a rich life.
Yeah,
because you got sober.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And so you have rich relationships. You've lived a rich life. You've been of service. You've got to travel. You've got to love deeply, right?
Yep.
And really, what more do we need?
Well, it, it, it's so different than what I had before I got sober. And everything you just said was non-existent.
Yeah, you were alone in your house
Alone
drinking
in my house,
beer.
drinking, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
sounded pretty lonely.
it
And
was
that-
very lonely and
yeah.
depressing, and
Yeah.
ugh, I never want to go back to that again.
It sounds like you might be in the clear, Jim. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, knock on wood.
yeah,
One
knock
day at
on
a
wood.
time. One day at a time.
I can be around people drinking. I can be around people smoking weed, and I am not triggered at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't relax. My guard is
Yeah.
up, right? The monster is just waiting.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yep.
You've seen that over and over again. And
Yep.
well, we've reached the end of our time.
I survived that.
You did survive that. Thank you so much for coming in, Jim.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it, and I love talking to you.
I enjoyed this.
All right.
Thank you, Laura.